Hello everyone, my name is Inshirah Tahir. I am a former member of the LUMUN Society and I am very honored to be invited to the LUMUN training platform today by our wonderful Undersecretary Generals, Shami Merish and Essen. And I'm here to talk about something that intimidated me a lot when I started out as an MUNer, unmoderated caucuses, and how to tackle them, how to do well in them, and how to do them in a manner that you're able to facilitate a good MUN performance by virtue of performing well in the unmoderated caucuses. So I will today talk about the purpose of an unmod, the way they work differently with different kind of people in your committee, and then just a few tips and tricks on how to do well in an unmoderated caucus. And hopefully they will be helpful to you as well. So now moving forward, firstly, the purpose of an unmoderated caucus. So on paper, the purpose of an unmoderated caucus is to facilitate informal discussion within the committee over the agenda of the committee and allow for delegates to interact with each other in more of an informal setting to come to a consensus, to discuss various points of contention. These are supervised by the DICE members and they simply observe how diplomatically you can carry yourselves outside of formal debate and how good you are at convincing more and more people of your ideas to get your stance and the stance of your country to be pushed forward by the committee as a whole. However, more implicitly, if you are an experienced MUNer, then you will understand that unmods are a very big part of your plan for any MUN conference. So whenever we go into a conference, we have a particular plan laid out. We have decided what our main solutions are going to be, what our primary stance is, what who are the countries that are likely to work with us, who are countries that are likely to oppose us, how much support we need to garner by the end of the conference in order to win or in order to have our own draft resolution passed. Now, when you talk about what your main purpose for an unmod needs to be, in my experience, the main purpose of any unmod had to be not to gain more numbers and not to gain more support in terms of making a block, but to have more support for your policy and have more support for your solution. When you're approaching an unmod, you need to understand that if you go in and immediately start talking about block formation or immediately start trying to convince people to be on your side or to vote for your solution or to vote for your draft resolution, you're likely to polarize them by appearing overly enthusiastic, overly competitive. People who have any amount of immune experience are likely to see through you as well, and they're just going to kind of move away from you from that point onwards. You don't really have substance in what you're demanding. You haven't really convinced them to support the content that you're bringing forward, but are rather just asking for their support. And that cannot serve you well in terms of performing well at an MUN. So your approach and the purpose you need to use an unmod for, especially the first few ones, need to be to push your ideas forward, to talk to people about the agenda, to talk to them about what they think about the agenda, what they think about the mod that you guys have discussed so far, and then try to introduce your own solution to them, talk to them about what you just talked about in your speech, tell them about the framework that you have prepared, ask them if they can lend you their support, ask them if they have any questions about it, if they have any improvements they want to suggest to it. My the stance with Unmod is usually to allow it to be a space where people can discuss my ideas with me, where people can discuss their own approaches with me, where I can develop a better understanding of what they want out of the discussion, and then also shift my solution or change my solution as much as I can to agree with them more so that it becomes more of a collaborative effort. If you keep trying to improve your framework and if you show them that you value their opinion, you value their input, and you're trying to work together with them, they're just likelier to support you till the very end, because then your draft resolution doesn't become a paper that you have written with your solution, but more of a collaborative effort that you have created with the group of people over 5 days, and that can end up being very important for you in terms of simply having more genuine, more sincere support throughout the committee, having people stand up and support your solution, having people stand up and talk about your solution because they understand your solution, they understand what you're talking about, they agree with your reasoning, and they genuinely want to support what you're saying. And that kind of support ends up showing in the moderated caucuses very well. Having more and more people stand up and say that they agree with you, even if they're not naming your country, even if they're not naming your personality, can mean that the dais will see that there are more and more people who support your solution. Of course, this means that you need to establish ownership of that solution or that framework or that stance in the very beginning or that policy in the very beginning. But when people keep talking about it and you have been convincing them in the unmod to support that particular idea, the dais will see that more and more people are agreeing with what you're saying, and that will translate into more prominence in the committee, a better perception in the committee, something that will ultimately help you perform better at an MUN. Now, moving forward, let's talk about understanding your committee. Now, naturally, this does mean things like understanding the agenda, understanding the mandate of the committee, understanding what the committee is setting out to achieve. Here, your karmas become very relevant. The general mandate your committee has within the United Nations become very relevant. But another important thing is to understand the kind of people you will be interacting with, particularly in the unmod. Now, this list is by no means exhaustive, but I have generally noticed that people you will meet in an MUN can fall roughly into three categories. First and foremost, you have very eager, very enthusiastic MUNers. Now, some of these are what we call power delegate, but in my mind is a more toxic, aggressive delegate who is very tense all the time and who has some very petty mean to get support in the committee. And that's not what I'm talking about primarily right now. I just mean experienced delegates who are coming from schools and colleges that want to win conferences, that have invested in conferences. They have coaches, they have teams that have historically been winning, and they're very passionate about the activity, and there is nothing wrong with that. Very often, the people are able to engage in very healthy competition. The second category of people you will meet in your committee are individuals who understand MUNs, who are very good at MUNs, but not necessarily overly invested in it as an activity. They see MUN as any other extracurricular, and they're there to learn, they're there to develop their public speaking skills. They might even be there to meet more people, more like-minded individuals, and delve into some intellectual discussion about some important topic that they now have the chance to learn. These people are more so at the conference for the learning experience. The third category of people, and one that is unfortunately more undermined in our circuit, are beginners, newcomers to MUN, people who are just starting out, people who haven't gotten all of the technicalities down yet, and people who are still learning. Now, I will talk a little bit about how to tackle each of these categories of people, and then we will move forward. So when we talk about the first one, the over enthusiastic, eager, very experienced MUN that you come across, you have to understand that it's very important to carry yourself with confidence. This does not in any way mean that you act in any obnoxious manner, but you need to be well researched and your mannerisms need to show that you're well researched. When you step into an unmoderated caucus, you shouldn't be looking lost and unsure of where you want to go. You should get up and start talking to perhaps the person right next to you about what has been discussed in the committee, about what you think about the committee. When you comment on other people's ideas, make sure that your comments are engaging, particularly when you're dealing with other experienced MUNers. Make sure that if they are dismantling your solution, your theory, you have responses and you're able to offer those responses in a diplomatic yet firm manner so that you don't get intimidated by them or you don't look like you know any less than them, and that can ultimately end up ruining your perception in the committee. You also then have to make sure that you do not shy away from these people, which is a mistake I have made in the past, shying away from main competitors, and very often come off to the chair as you not thinking that you're good enough, or you not thinking that you're good enough to directly compete with them, and you kind of avoiding them when blocks are formed or when unmods are happening. Instead, engage with them. Listen to their solution, propose your own solution. Very often, even if you have different solutions, you can try to propose a compromise. In all likelihood, they will not agree with you, because they do want to have their own standing in the committee, and they do want to have their own point of contention and an individual spot. But at least you will look like the person who is trying to collaborate, who is trying to contribute to the discussion, and that will put you in a better light as well. Not shying away from them, not being intimidated by your best competitor is very important when engaging with the first category. Talking about the second one, people who are there for the learning experience. Now, in my time, I would argue these are people I have most looked forward to working with. Because these are actually individuals who can most easily be convinced if you are well researched. If you generally are going in the solution that are well prepared, that are well researched, and you have reasoning to back your solution, these are the people who are likeliest to come to your side, especially if you're ready to take their input as well, especially if you're ready to give them credit as well for their input, for their solution. They will be your most loyal allies in the committee, because they will see you as someone who allows for a good learning environment, see you as someone who allows for a collaborative environment, and they're the likeliest to work with you, and you're the easiest to work with without any of the tension that they're trying to avoid with other our delegates, right? Thirdly, we have people who are beginners, newcomers. Now, the old school approach here, and something that I suffered from in the beginning, is to kind of use these people as numbers to just gain more support for your blog. I personally think that strategy is not only inhumane but also doesn't work. It doesn't work for a variety of reasons. Firstly, it appears very transparent. If you have a block of like 30 people, and aside from you and one other person, no one else is talking, or no one else is getting up and giving speeches, your block will not be as powerful as you think it is. And while you might be able to get a draft resolution passed, you will not make a good impression on a majority of committee directors, because they will see you as the person who is trying to dominate a block too much, who doesn't have a lot of collaboration in their block, doesn't promote learning within their block. But more importantly, gaining supporters in an MUN is easier than maintaining support in an MUN. And even if you think that you're able to get these people on your side, because you're taking advantage of the fact that they don't know as much as you about this particular activity yet, and you're undermining them based on simply this one extracurricular activity that you happen to be more experienced at, they're likely to be forced by other people. You might walk into your conference, and most of us have been there, where we leave a conference having a big block, and we come in the next day and we have lost like 8 people. Because these people get forced by other competitors, they get forced by other blocks. The only way, in my experience, to make sure this doesn't happen is to allow people to be a part of your blog rather than trying to lead them constantly. This means that you allow them to learn even if you know more. If you do happen to be someone who is far more experienced, and then try to help them out, try to help them by giving them some of your research, giving them a few points only so they can stand up and give a speech. Encourage them a little bit if you can. Let them run their speech by you if they're a little bit nervous about it. Public speaking is a skill like any other, and someone not knowing a lot about it does not give you the right to undermine or use them. And in all likelihood, if you do that, you will end up losing their support as well. At the end, that will end up costing you your prominence in the committee. So it's very important to make sure that you're sincere and earnest in your effort, so that the reason these people are working with you is also more fulfilling for them, and they're likely to stick by you even when the tensions are running high on the fourth and the fifth day, and everyone is just trying to poach more people for their block. So in terms of understanding your committee, try to approach the people that you see in your committee in the most humanizing manner that you can. In my experience, I know there are people who have won simply because they have large numbers. I know there are people who have won simply because they're able to just keep more people by their side, even through intimidation and aggression. But in my experience, the only technique that is going to work a majority of the time is if you make an earnest and sincere effort with people and they end up supporting you, not because they agree, not because they're intimidated by you, but because they agree with the idea that you're proposing. And that's the only way they will stick by you when tensions are running very high. So now let's move on to the first thing that I want to talk about in terms of how to do well at an Unmod. So here, as you can read, I will talk about two things. I will talk about your research and I will talk about your speeches. And I will talk about how both will serve you well in your performance in the Unmod. Now, firstly, let's talk about research. As I previously established, a majority of the people at any MUN conference are people who want to engage in learning and who want to engage in an intellectual discussion about the topic. The only way you can also engage in this discussion, and more importantly, the only way you can defend your stance, the only way you can defend the point that you're putting forward, even when your points are being attacked, all in the spirit of healthy competition, is by knowing the topic inside out. Now, there's another video present on this channel where Marish and Essen talk about researching and how to do research well. I would encourage you to watch that if you are lost on how to do research in the best manner possible. But having good research is the only way you can conduct yourself in an unmod in a manner that people take you seriously, that people don't dismiss what you're saying, and people know that you know what you're talking about. This also means that people are likely to come to you if they're confused about something, if they want advice on a particular solution that they're proposing, and if you maintain your mannerism in a way that you're a nice person, a helpful person who also knows a lot, then more and more people are just likely to turn to you when they want to give another speech or when they're confused about a certain point, when they can't decide what block they necessarily belong in. And you just knowing more will help you there a lot. Secondly, and very importantly, your speeches are the make or break in terms of you doing well in an unmod. And this is true on multiple levels. Number one, giving a good speech, if you're in a big committee, this means that you might get one seat in the GSL right before an unmod happens. In a smaller committee, this means that you have had multiple chances to speak before the unmod finally happens. This means that your speeches are the first impression you're making on the people who you will be working with in the unmod. The points that you make in your speech are the point that you will end up talking about in your unmod. And if you make your points well, more people are likely to be convinced by you when you repeat the same points to them. More importantly, more people are likely to approach you in a very large committee, in a committee of, let's say, a double delegate committee with 250 people in it. As soon as the unmod begins, everyone is looking for a group to join. If you're someone who has delivered a good speech, has established that you're both well spoken and well researched in the committee, more people are likely to navigate towards you because you appear as an automatic leader of the committee in a manner without having to resort to any petty or intimidation tactics to establish that. This is also very important because no matter how many people you're able to convince in an unmod to support your solution, no matter how many people agree with your solution, and no matter how many people stand up and talk about your solution, unless they're naming you in their speeches, the chair will not know that they're talking about your solution. The chair will not associate a certain point with you, no matter how much you talk about that point in the unmod, if you have not established ownership of that particular solution in the moderated caucus as well. It is very important that everything you're talking about in the unmod or everything that you're trying to push for in the unmod, not really the details can be missed out, but the holistic idea, the holistic policies, it still need to be voiced first in the moderated caucus in order for the dais to understand that these are your ideas that the majority of the committee is now supporting. A good speech and good research is the only way you will have the premise set to go ahead and perform well in an unmod. And an unmod cannot simply work in isolation without the other two happening as well. Now, moving forward, let's talk about lobbying. So I'll talk about block formation right after this. But when it comes to lobbying, there are four things I want to talk about. Firstly, be nice. And this also ties into everything I've said so far. And while it might sound like a cliche, being nice and being more approachable, in my experience, can make or break your performance. You are going to be with these people for 5 days. If you are being mean to them or intimidating them or just being very dismissive, they will see through it. And once again, someone performing in an MUN does not define who that person is at all. So chances are that these people, if they don't feel like you're someone they would want to be friends with outside of the conference, they will likely not put themselves through 5 days of your company simply because you are intimidating them into it. What does being nice mean? It means a variety of things. My approach with an MUN is at the opening ceremony only, approach people. Introduce yourself. Naturally, don't try to approach people and make them uncomfortable if they are not engaging with you. But if you catch them at eye, offer them a smile. If you're interacting with someone, be kind to them, be nice to them, ask them about their life, and then even move on without asking them their committee, without asking them if they happen to be in your committee, without asking them what their stance is on the topic. Try to talk about normal things with people, normal friendly chatter that you would do like with any other person you meet. What does this mean inside the committee? Inside the committee, particularly in an unmoderated caucus, this means things like not hogging the discussion. This means things like being the person who at the beginning of the unmod says, all right guys, we're all standing in a circle, let's go one by one, and then being the one to go at the end and then talk about your point. Not only does that make you very approachable and the person people are more comfortable being around, but that also means that people are likely to look at you as a natural leader without you having to overexert yourself and establish yourself as one. It also means that you will be leading most of the discussion in the unmod and will have the last say while it's still not hogging the conversation or not having any of the repercussions of appearing at the person who is unwilling to let go of the floor. This does then mean that even if the chair is to walk in, you're the person who is leading the discussion in a circle, who the person speaking is looking at right now and nodding along with as you're talking. And because you have listened to everyone and because you have given everyone a chance to speak, when you're likely to speak up, people will listen to you. And these kind of small things, small gestures, small mannerisms can end up not only helping you garner more support, but it will also make your MUN content more enjoyable. It will make you less miserable in your 5 days that you're competing, and it will just generally give you a better experience. You're meeting people you will not meet otherwise if you weren't attending this MUN. It's an amazing opportunity to get to know more people. Most of the best MUNers I know have been incredibly friendly and have made some very good friends at the MUN that they have attended. And I think that's very important, and that causation does make a lot of sense. Secondly, don't focus too much on numbers. I already talked about this. Um, Making the biggest block is not as important as maintaining your stance in a lot of committees. If you're a country that necessarily have a polarizing stance, you need to understand that the trade-off between having more people and compromising on your stance is one that you have to judge very carefully. I have been USA in a committee which was the Organization of the American States. That was a committee primarily made up of Latin American countries. I was representing USA during the Trump administration and the topic was immigration. My stance was necessarily one that polarized most of the countries. And while that did mean that I did end up losing a lot of people who agreed that they would otherwise work with my delegation but were not willing to work with us because of our stance. I still would not compromise on my stance because that was something I had to abide by. There are ways to work around this. You can try to then maybe not compromise on your start, but find another area where you can have another framework that more people can agree on. For example, with immigration, we made a framework for rehabilitating immigrants, and we tried to unify more people on that, and we did manage to garner a good number for ourselves. So while numbers are important, understand what you're giving up in the trade-off when you try to go for a large number of people, and make sure once again that the support that you're gaining can be maintained long term, that the people who are working with you because they want you and not because you're intimidating them into it. The latter will simply not work in the long run. You will have lost all your support by the fifth day. People will post your block members and it will not turn out well for you. Next, do not be afraid to build others up. Once again, this is something I talked about earlier. This particularly applies to when you're interacting with new or emerging MUN. Do not be afraid to help other people out. Do not be afraid to give other people credit in your speeches. When you give another person credit in your speech, it not only allow that person to do the same for you or encouraging them to do the same for you, it also just makes you look like a more friendly person to the dais. It makes you look like someone who is not afraid of giving up the limelight for a bit and who can genuinely admit when another person has presented a very good point. It, if anything, builds a very good perception of you. And in most cases, the people that you're giving credit to, you mentioning them in your speech will not make their award, but it will get you the kind of recognition that you want to get in committee. And it will also normalize the idea of mentioning other people in your speeches. And that is something that will end up benefiting you at the very end. Also, just simply inviting people to speak to them, helping them with their speeches, people are likely to then support you in the long run because you have been kind to them. Even if they don't end up supporting you in the long run, you have nothing to really lose by by supporting people who are not in your block. If in the best case scenario, you gain more members who are more loyal to your stance. In the worst case scenario, you do not exactly lose anything. So do not be afraid to embrace the learning element of MUN. This is something we have been advocating for in the LUMUN spirit, and perhaps something that you will also benefit from focusing on if you're not doing that already. Lastly, push for your policy stance, not for people to vote for you. This is something I've talked about already. Getting people to vote for you, trying to encourage them to vote for you, is not is a very futile activity, in my opinion. Of course, not at the very end, because at the very end voting is taking place, but trying to make them do it or like on to agree to it on the first and the second day will not get you very far. People can simply change their mind. You cannot hold them accountable for it. They don't really owe you anything. Instead, try to get them to agree to your policy, agree to your solution, so they can support your paper because they agree with the content that you're presenting and not because you were the first person to ask them to vote for you. Because the latter will just, in most cases, not work. Next, let's talk about forming blocks. Now, blocks are naturally important to have more prominence in committee. They're also important if you are in a committee where you feel that getting the draft resolution passed is a very important thing. Now, when we talk about block and we talk about consolidating your block in particular, my policy or my take on this basically is to once again upload the committee in a manner where I just talk about my solution with people, where I get more people on board with my ideas, where I explain my ideas to people and make sure that they agree with my ideas and they think my reasoning is correct. As we go on, however, by the second or the third unmod, I would then ask those same people to perhaps, sit with me, or I would go and sit with them, to pass just to them, discuss things with them, even during the committee, just kind of maintain a conversation with them, promote a working environment where we seem to be working together in the committee rather than working as individual delegates. I feel like this kind of formation or this kind of an approach allows for a more seamless transition into an eventual block rather than immediately going up to people and asking them to join your block. Um, this allows you to also have more people who take ownership of the block. These are people who feel like they just happen to be in a block with you, and hence they don't see that as your block, but they see it as a block that they are also a part of. They're then likely to be more encouraged to get more people to join. They're likely to be more encouraged to advocate for the policies that your block is promoting by virtue policies that you are promoting. And these are simply people who will work more to gain more prominence for your block. And that is very important. Next, of course, once your block has prominence, how do you position yourself within a block? This is also something I briefly touched upon earlier. do not shy away necessarily from having people in your blog who are also very competitive or who are also very good at the activity. Instead, try to make sure that the points and the solutions that you're proposing are ones that stand out from them, irrespective of you sharing a floor with them. This is perhaps one of the only effective manners in making yourself stand out, even when directly competing with some of the strongest delegates in the committee. In my opinion, as someone who has chaired committees and who has been to several committees, I think delegates who do not shy away from competition within their own block, who allow multiple leaders to be part of their block and still manage to stand out, are always more likely to get an award than delegates who are leading a block completely alone, because the latter does not, in very many cases, make a lot of sense. They seem to be people who are fighting for a point of contention for the sake of it. Their their tactics seem to be very transparent because they're just doing that for the sake of standing out, and the committee director is not likely to be very impressed with that kind of technique. However, being able to be part of a blog with a lot of powerful members and still standing out through your speeches, through the research that you've done, and through the point that you're speaking out about is very important. Particularly if you have a power delegate in your blog that puts you in a unique position to then become the leader of the block, who more people turn to when they need advice, try to help out more of the members while the power delegate might be trying to intimidate them, try to talk to them in a more friendly, more kind manner, try to be a contrast to everything that we as MUNers have grown to hate about the quintessential power delegate, so that you are then able to be the safe haven within your own block. More people are just likely to flock towards you, even in Unmod, and it does end up becoming apparent when within two people, one being a power delegate and the other being a very natural leader of the block. So in no way would I advise anyone to adapt similar technique to a power delegate in order to compete with them. But in my opinion, being at a complete contrast and just trying to stand out by my speeches and my research rather than trying to combat them in any manner has always benefited me more. And lastly, how do you work with having a very unique stance? Another thing I touched upon earlier, you might in some cases, perhaps if you are not Korea on topic about neutralization, you might have a stance that most people will not be able to agree with. You might have a stance that polarizes a lot of countries. What do you do in that scenario? My advice in an unmod regarding this kind of a technique would always be to then find other areas to engage with. You can be firm about your stance without being aggressive about it, and that's very important. You can nicely tell people that, oh, this is the stance of my country and I have to support it. I have very often, in a very informal manner in unmod, told people, sorry, I understand what you're saying, I just can't agree with you, this is not my stance. That is one of the friendlier ways to let them know that this is not something you can do because that the rules of MUN, while simultaneously allowing yourself to then move into a discussion with them about other parts of the topic that you can agree with. And more often than not, even with the more contentious topic, there will be parts that everyone can come together on, and you can perhaps move the debate towards those topics a little bit more. And even if you have a particular stance that you can incorporate in any VR, approaching blogs and talking to them about other parts of your other solutions that you have and asking them to incorporate those solutions in their DR because those solutions they do agree with, or simply standing up and speaking about how you agree with about majority of a particular paper, but you don't have to vote, you can vote for it in a particular stance, and still be way you can make your yourself more relevant to a discussion, even if your particular stance is very polarizing. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be very polarizing or very angsty in the unmod. It just means that yes, you will not be able to have a lot of people in your blog because not a lot of people will agree with your stance. But you can come together on other sides of the blog. And lastly, what to avoid. Don't fake it. This basically means what it says. Do not like these tactics are very interesting. I have not used them. Maybe they work, and I am sure they have worked for certain people, but they look like going into a discussion right at the committee that is passing you and trying to make yourself look like the one leading a circle. Once again, very transparent, something that your co-committee members will not like you for, and likely the chair will see through as well. Um, Trying to tell people that their stance is something when it's not. Firstly, they can just Google it and find out that you're lying to them. But also, other people will just tell them, even if you don't. So, even as you try to gain members for your blog, there are other ways of doing it than it's straight up like faking what their stance is and like pretending that you know something when you don't. In my opinion, faking it doesn't work, especially when you're doing that activity for 5 days and at some point you will slip up. And even if you don't, most committee directors are also experienced MUNers. They have seen all of this before. They will know if you just so happen to be dominating discussion every time they pass by while everyone else looks at you with confused faces. So just be very careful. Once again, I would say hard work is the only way to get ahead. Research well, prepare well, train well, and try to speak about things that you know about, try to engage sincerely and honestly in Unmods. And I would argue that's the only way to make it. Don't resort to petty tactics. Once again, do not do things like naming your USB. I do not think there are any DICE members who have ever been impressed by that. Um, Insisting that you would be the one to hand over a paper also doesn't make sense. Things like standing on chair to dominate discussion. I mean, if you do need to yell and shout to dominate discussion, then your performance is lacking and someone will see through it. Just being very disingenuous, being unfair to people, not giving them a competitive advantage by sabotaging them in some way or the other, all of these things can end up, in most cases, biting you in the back. But even if they don't, and even if you do end up winning the MUN, you're not essentially improving on anything. MUN is an activity where with each conference you can get a lot better than you were when you were starting it. And resorting to petty tactics will just take away from the experience that you would have had otherwise. Going with an open mind does essentially mean you might be the most well-researched delegate in a committee, but particularly if you're going to international conferences or the major conferences in Pakistan even, you will meet people who are smarter than you. You will meet people who know more than you. If they try to critique your discussion, if they try to critique your solutions, be open to it. Listen to them. Even if, once again, someone's not the best public speaker, that does not define their intellect on any level. They still might completely surprise you by knowing much more about the topic and just not having enough practice in public speaking. So always be open to new ideas, always be open to critique and improvement. In all likelihood, it will just make your solution look more concrete when you finally present them in your DR. So go in with an open mind. Lastly, block sizes matter, but not as much as we think. I think this is once again a myth that old school MUN have built for us. Passing a DR is the only way to win, or an automatic win does not apply in most cases, especially in bigger conferences. I know it doesn't apply at LUMUN. We try to promote the LUMUN spirit, we try to promote a collaborative learning environment, and we definitely do not think that the biggest block is the only way to winning. The only way to winning, in my opinion, would again be being very well researched, being very good at Unmods, trying to garner all the support that you can, but more so having meaningful support within the committee, having people stand up and talk about your point and your solution, and not just people who have not mentioned you once in their speech is standing up and saying yes to your DR. The latter does not translate into meaningful support. It's also not ambassadorial at all, and it will end up reflecting at the end of the day in the verdict that you receive when you're done with the conference. So yeah, that was everything that I had to say about unmoderated caucuses. I tried to cover everything, but very open to questions. I believe you can comment them, and I will try to have one of the brilliant Undersecretary Generals answer them. Thank you so much once again to Mary Shamir and Essen for inviting me. And good luck for Newman for starting this brilliant initiative. I hope all of you are safe and healthy, all your loved ones are safe and healthy, and that you're coping well in this very trying time. Thank you so very much for listening to me.